Oh boy, here we go. We're going live, Bruce.
All right.
To make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello, everybody. Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss. You're not going to believe where I am and who I'm hanging out with. Oh, yes, you can. Here he is right here. Hanging out with Bruce Condello here in Lincoln, Nebraska. Kind of hanging out on the railroad tracks behind us, except, what is that? That's a painting? It's a picture?
That is the...
Holy cow.
That's the highway to your dreams of big fish.
I see Robin, Mike Cottrell, Jason Nepstad, Ethan Lovelace, fisheries biologist, is checking in. Glad to have you guys. You know what we're going to do tonight? We're going to talk about growing great big fish. And you guys are going to get to be right in the middle of that. We were also going to have TJ Hudson, but TJ called off at the last minute because he's got a little family thing he's got to be working on. John Funk's checking in. Look at that. There's Leo Wynn. You know Leo.
I know Leo. Hey, I'm gonna
take
take this phone. No, not taking a selfie.
Clayton
I'm going
Bounds.
to share this to bigbluegill.com so I get the Big Bluegill people in.
That's great. Clark Cole. There's Leanne. Clark Cole, buddy. Josh Falk. What's up, Pond Boss? Hey, man, we're just hanging out. Frank James. There he is, man. We got a bunch of guys watching this, Bruce. Holy cow.
Okay, I am sharing to a group.
Do it. Share it off. Let's go. Let me see if I can find it here on my little handy-dandy laptop so I can see the questions, because we got a bunch of people. Bruce Condello's watching. How'd that happen?
I got it now, right?
You must have shared it, huh?
I did. Okay, we're sharing to bigbluegill.com.
There you go. Sweet.
There we go.
Look at that.
And Optimal Bluegill Food.
There you go.
I'm going to share
I can
to
hear you
Catch and
talking in the
Release
Background.
Nation. Fishing
All right.
Addicts.
I'm trying to get it up on my laptop, which it looks like it's wanting to spin up and do that. We're going to talk about some big... Bill Russell. So ready to hear about growing big bluegills. We're going to do that. Threw everything away. Leo threw everything away just to watch.
Leo!
All right, man.
Leo, you have sat right in this chair and made me Vietnamese cuisine.
Ah, look at that. We even mixed this up an old-fashioned. You got one, don't you?
I do have an old-fashioned.
So we're going to have a little fun talking about big, big, big fish. So look at there. Here we are, Bruce. See us right there? I'm gonna spread it out. Now we can see all the questions easy, and I can slow them down. There's Billy Birch, the catfish man, Catfish Birch.
Billy.
He's checking in from Southeast Texas. Man, we got people from all over the nation, Bruce. Holy cow.
I just shared to about 20 different groups.
Wow, and there's Pat Williamson checking in. James Sewell, how many times a year do bluegills spawn? Depends on where you live there, James. If you live in the middle of Texas, they're going to spawn 5 times a year. How many times do they spawn here? And
once or twice.
So we're near Lincoln, Nebraska. And I see Connie Bingham, and look at that. She's checking in. Victor Moberg, he's checking in.
Hi, Connie.
Yeah. So let's see here. You guys know the drill. You guys that watch this show every week. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like and share this video to your timeline. Bruce just got through sharing it to like 5 timelines.
No, more like 20, Bob.
Oh, God, you're going to get a hat no matter what.
Oh, yeah. I haven't had a Pond Boss hat in a while.
Well, I've got some.
Okay, I'll take it.
We're going to do it. Hey,
I'll take it.
If you do those things, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine, click like, share to your timeline, you'll be eligible for a drawing for a hat and a Pond Boss mug.
Yep.
These things know how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. And
yes.
I don't know how they do it, but they do. Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year right there, folks. This is what fuels the economy of your pond. It's what fuels the economy of Pond Boss. Helps us do this show. And so does Purina Mills and Texas Hunter. I want to thank them for their sponsorship. So let's start tackling a few questions there, Bruce. Matter of fact, Jim Liner, you know Jim from Montgomery, Alabama.
Hello, Jim.
He was asking, what do we do to get a bluegill bigger than 2 pounds? 2 pounds seems like it's the hardest nut to crack.
Well, 2 pounds is a hard nut to crack, but I'm sitting next to the only person who's ever cracked the 3-pound nut. That didn't sound good, did it? It didn't come out exactly the way I wanted it to.
Well, we know how you mean it.
But Bob has cracked the 3-pound nut in North Carolina. So, you know, as much as I might like to consider myself a pseudo-expert, Bob is the real expert. But it's all about water quality.
Okay.
And it's about giving that fish what it needs to eat from the beginning all the way through its life. Don't let up. Make sure it's got plenty to eat all the way through, whether that be pelleted feed, invertebrates, zooplankton, whatever it needs. You need to make sure that you don't let this bluegill take a year off or 2 years off.
Or 2 weeks off.
Or even 2 weeks off.
So let me tell you what, my fisheries biologist ears just hurt. What I just heard Bruce say is a bluegill has kind of a short lifespan.
Right.
And it takes some time for that fish to hit 2 pounds or 2 pounds plus. So our job as pond managers, if our goal truly is to grow bluegills bigger than 2 pounds, they need to have what they need to eat from the minute they come off the nest as little sack fry. When they come off the nest and they're maybe this big, you need to have your water quality such that they have all the food that they can eat. Now, you also got to keep in mind, there's only going to be a percentage of them that are going to get big. I mean,
that's correct.
You've even got a Condello strain of bluegill that you developed.
Yes.
And to kind of tell folks how you did that, or just, the basics and what the consequences of that has
About 20 years ago, we acquired a property that allowed us to have some access to fresh water. And I decided I was going to play around with some genetics. And we took the fastest growing fish of every generation. And then we did this generation after generation and kept peeling off the fastest growing fish, allowed them to reproduce with other fastest growing fish. Then we had some other fisheries where we had some availability of some adult fish. So we made sure that we didn't stick to one genetic line. We didn't want to have any inbreeding, really. But in the end, it was about finding fish that not only grew fast, but would grow fast utilizing some artificial feed. And we also genetically selected for fish that had nice color and nice morphology. And in the end, we ended up with a fish that would grow to be 2 pounds, maybe a year faster than an ordinary bluegill would. They definitely get to a pound pretty quickly, but we have a few different fisheries out there that have these bluegill in them right now. Go ahead, Bob.
No, all I was going to say is one of the things that I've heard you say over and over is you might get, let's just pick a number, 10,000 babies. Mm-hmm. Out of those 10,000 babies, when you were genetically selecting, how many of those would you actually keep, and were they boys or girls?
Oh, out of 10,000, we would keep maybe 100.
That's a low percentage, folks.
Yeah.
And so that was more so to select for rapid growth, larger growth, body conformation, and color.
And feed conversion.
And okay, because you knew you were going to need to feed these fish to make them really get on up there. I see Ann Kanye just said hello. Victor Moberg, he's saying, I saw it back here somewhere. Boy, we got some stuff going on here. Hadn't been around, glad to see he's back. Let's see, we got James Sewell's question. Robert Burns, best lures to use in a pond. Why don't you hit that real quick? I'm going to be reading through here. What's the best lures to use in a pond?
Depends what your goal is.
Bam.
If your goal is to catch a lot of fish, I'd be using a little 32nd ounce jig and a little piece of nightcrawler. If the goal is to catch the biggest fish, you need to figure out what the biggest fish are eating, and you need to give them a chance to look at something that looks like what they're eating. So if they're eating little fish, little tiny minnow imitator. If they're plucking big invertebrates like dragonfly larvae, you'd like to have maybe a little jig that's black and green. It would look like something like a dragonfly larvae.
So match the hatch, basically.
Match the hatch.
And so you got to know the food chain of what your target fish are eating. So pick a lure that mimics what's living in your pond that your fish are eating. So it also depends, are you going to catch bluegill? Are you going to try to catch red ear sunfish? Are you chasing crappie? Are you after that elusive largemouth bass? There you go.
Yeah.
Leo Wynn says, what projects are we cooking up? Well, here's project one right there, see?
Yeah, right.
He's going to fix that tomorrow. But we are working on a couple of pretty cool lake projects together, and we'll share that when the time is right. Right now, it's a secret. Oh, busted secret. Nobody wants to hear that. Steve Mondrush, he did the hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Michael Ehrig shared it to a couple of groups. Michael's from Iowa. Matter of fact, he's on your big bluegill page a lot.
Yes.
Doug Schmidt, Blanton's on Rocks. No, actually, what are we drinking? We got Buffalo Trace mixed as an old fashioned. So we got a little orange muddled in it with a cherry, a little bit of simple syrup, some.
It's non-alcoholic.
Yeah, well, sort of.
There's no alcohol in it actually, other than what we put in. And I would like to say the people that we're seeing joining us right now are kind of like a veritable who's who.
There are some studs looking at
There's
us.
some studs.
We got to perform,
right now.
man. We got to get this
We
right.
got to perform. Leo Nam Wim is kind of Leo Nam Win is as far as I'm concerned, he's a genius. Now, he will not admit it, and he likes to kind of stay in the background, but this guy, Leo, I need questions from you. You've been sitting in this chair. You've made me some of the best food I've ever eaten, literally from the chair I'm sitting in. But we didn't have this picture right here. So
Yeah, the railroad
you may
tracks.
not recognize it, but I'm at the kitchen table. But Leo, thanks for showing up.
Donald McDonald's on there. He says he solved his raccoon problem. He bought a one-and-done feeder, raccoon-proof. Excellent. John Funk, sign up for auto renewal. That's a good idea, too, because we do have auto renewal, so you don't have to worry about getting a renewal slip. Victor Smith, Jacob West. Jacob, he and his family been building a lake for, I think, probably Jacob's in his 30s. They started on that lake when he was like 12, I think.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Related to Eric?
No, he should be, but they're not.
Okay.
Yep. But Jacob and his family, you know, their problem? Water. It keeps raining. They
Yeah.
got to drain it, you know, and good gosh, it's like storms are trending over. And you never hear a pond guy complain about rain, and I'm not starting now. But if it took about a month break, we'd be okay, wouldn't we, Jacob? Look at there. There's Dick Tabbert checking in. Chris Horsley. And Kanye says, hi, Bob and Bruce. Clark Cole, could you compare and differentiate between bluegill, copper-nosed bluegill, long ears, pumpkin seeds, red ears, green sunfish? What in the world is that?
I don't know what you're talking
Dude.
about.
And any of those other sunfish we see in the North Texas area. Also, do they compete with each other? And should we eliminate any from a private lake? All right, well, I'll tell you what. Here we go, Clark. Clark Cole worked for me a long time ago, like in 1980, 86, 87 through there.
Good.
When he was I guess he was in high school or had just gone to college. Then he went on to become a physical therapist, and now he's gray-headed. You know, I mean, he's like a kid the other day. So here's the difference between these different fish. We got compare differentiate bluegill, copper-nosed bluegill. Here's the difference between bluegill and copper-nosed bluegill. Bluegill and copper-nosed bluegill are the same species, different subspecies. It's like comparing an Angus bull to a Hereford. They're the same creature, but different strains, different kinds. Long ears are totally different. You know, the bluegills are going to spawn numerous times a year, twice here. Maybe in a strange year, you might get 3 spawns. I don't know if they're real eggy and nutritionally cool.
Yeah, we do see fish that in August, if we were to fillet a harvested 8.5 inch female bluegill, that will have eggs. So, like, we know for a fact we're getting 2 spawns here in this northern tier in Nebraska, but I think, is it correct that as you move further north, you get fewer spawns?
That's right. That's right.
It's like,
in upstate New York, we would get 1 spawn. It would happen in July. They would grow so fast that they could outgrow the mouth size of the dominant size ranges of largemouth bass. So in upstate New York, in the northern tier, they were considered a nuisance because it would tend to stunt. You know, but once we started giving them a little better nutrition, where they could get a jump start, when they started getting, I mean, right after ice off and the water temperature gets up into the 50s, in just a few bluebird days, they'd spawn then they'd spawn again in July. And then they'd be eggy enough that if the temperatures were okay in September, they might, but I never saw them do that.
Todd Austin, hello. Billy Bates, hello.
Daniel Hendrick. I spent some time with Daniel last week, and I'll probably talk about his situation. He's a very cool guy, very unique environment. He's got an oxbow that's probably 10,000 years old that has migrated off of a creek. That's older than me. Migrated off of a creek that's probably half a mile away, and he's building a pond that's really pretty dadgum cool. What are you doing? Oh, Lord, here comes something. All right, now, hey, guys, great show, Michael Eric says. Thought that might have been some BV. No, it's not. It's, what are we drinking?
Well, we're drinking old fashions, but I would like to introduce a special guest tonight.
Okay.
We have somebody here. You had no idea. Just the fact that you're spending any time here, you deserve this moment. And this moment is Hank Parker. Ladies and gentlemen.
Hank Parker's in the
Parker's
house.
here.
There he is. Turn him around where you can see him. There you go.
Hank Parker.
Oh, boy.
My hero.
Hey, Jason Nepstad says that you look like Robert Downey Jr.
I've never heard that before, except 10 times today. You know what? That means a lot to me because I don't have much to go on in life. And the fact that I look anything at all like Robert Downey Jr., other than the fact that he was really, really a big-time drug abuser about 15, 20 years ago, which I'm not.
Yep, not yet. All right.
But I do like old fashions.
All right, here we go.
Thank you for the Robert Downey Jr. reference.
Okay, there's Tommy Davis. Tommy Davis is in the feed business in Central Texas. Leo's got a question. We'll hit that in a minute.
Leo.
John Wilson is checking in from Ohio, Chardon, Ohio.
There's no such place.
Yeah, there is. He's there. Unless he's at a Cleveland Indians. He watches this show. No kidding. John Wilson will be sitting in the front row of the Cleveland Indians baseball game. And as they're getting ready to play ball, he's watching this show. I promise you.
Well, I'm glad he is, but he should be watching the College World Series. Game 3.
Yeah.
Michigan won. Vanderbilt won.
So we'll see who goes to that.
We'll give you continuous updates. This is the place to be.
Yep. There it is over there on the TV. Then so Chuck Brinkman's checking in. Chuck's from west of St. Louis, Missouri. Okay. Danny Tolliver. I hadn't seen him in a while. All right, looks like Donald McDonald raised a glass and tipped a glass to us. Okay, so now Leo is asking this. He says, and we might as well talk about fish while we're doing this. Okay, hitting the water quality perspective, spill the details on the water quality secrets to maximize the aquatic growth among the local waters near you versus the waters from afar.
Okay, this is a great question. The thing I like about this question is it kind of feeds back to the thing that Pond Boss is all about, which ultimately, Pond Boss is about water quality. None of the goals that any of us want to achieve are achievable without water quality.
That's right.
So think about water quality like this. Water quality is about sunlight. Sunlight has to be able to get through the water column. If it does, it fuels all of this invertebrate growth. So if you can keep your water quality good, which means decent clarity, and
what's decent clarity to you?
I would say decent clarity is a minimum of 40 inches.
Really? All right, talk to us. Okay, so decent clarity for what span of time?
Okay, I would say for 90% of the year. If you can have 40 inches of clarity, that means that the sunlight is reaching the bottom of the pond or lake that you're talking about. Anything that's 40 inches or less deep. And what that means is now you have plant growth from the bottom in 3.5 feet of water, which means that you have oxygen there. And if you have oxygen, you have better types of invertebrates, correct?
Okay. All right.
Can invertebrates survive without oxygen?
No, they cannot survive without oxygen.
Right. So that means that you need to have some penetration of sunlight to the bottom. And if you can get it to 3.5 feet of water, that means in a lot of ponds, that's going to be at least 50% of the pond. A lot of times in ponds, 50% of the pond is going to be 3.5 feet deep or less. If that's the case, and you get the sunlight penetration, that means you have invertebrate growth all the way around the periphery of your pond, which means invertebrates grow, macroinvertebrates grow, you have big dragonfly larvae, the bluegill come in and consume those, the bass come in, eat the bluegill. You end up fueling the food chain from the bottom up.
You know, and that's great, because here's your take-home point, guys, is if you don't grow invertebrates, your baby bluegill, what was that? Your baby bluegill, your newly hatched bluegill, your young bluegill aren't going to make the cut. It's going to take them too long to get big enough to become substantial enough that they can eat fish food. So I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent. I do have some pond management clients who buy the Purina starter feeds, and they'll feed their bluegills as they're coming off the nest. But if you can do a combination, and that's tedious because you got to do that 2 or 3 times a day. And there's only one guy I know that's got time to do that, over here. But he doesn't even do that. He depends on invertebrate growth. So let's see, this kind of dovetails into what Frank James is saying. He says, hey guys, since southern bluegill and copper-nosed bluegill spawn multiple times, should southern ponds stay fertilized and green through the summer? In my opinion, they should stay fertile and green at least until the 1st of July. Then let them clear up because you got to get that invertebrate growth. And so what happens? Here's the way a bloom works. You get the algae bloom. It starts the algae bloom feeds the invertebrates. you get more invertebrates in the form of Daphnia and protozoans and things like that feed the bigger ones, that feed the little bluegill, then you've created an outstanding natural food chain. Of course, it gets a little complicated because you've also got to be looking at managing the predator-prey relationship in your pond. Because if you're going to try to grow giant bluegills, and you know they're going to spawn once, twice, 3 times, 5 times a year, you're going to be contending with high reproduction, which means you got to have a bunch of little bitty bluegills get eaten. Only the survival of the fittest works there. So you got a whole lot of different factors coming into play. There's David Rikes. He's checking in. David's he might be at the game with John Wilson. I don't know. Look at there. There's Teej. Teej is saying 2 great minds. See, that's Bruce always gets credit for being twice as smart as me. I love it. Look at that. Look at that. All right. So Dick Tabbert's loaded with dragonfly nymphs. That's probably why you're growing some of those giant bluegills that you post on Facebook. Hey, guys, if you want to see some big bluegills, click on Dick's Facebook page. He's always showing some giant fish. And looking at his fish and the coloration, not only does he have a lot of invertebrates going on, he's feeding these fish a good, high-protein, fish meal-based fish food. So I think that's a key. Don't you?
Yeah. Oh, it's the key really. The reason that fish food is such an important component of the equation is that it fills in all the gaps where the invertebrates aren't available. So like in a natural system, invertebrates are available maybe 20, 30, 40% of the time.
Yes, that's a big deal, guys.
And so if you have feed like Aaron Matus, who's like absolutely legendary for growing 2-pound plus bluegill, he makes sure that the fish just have something to eat all the time. And so the pellets don't end up being the main component, but they fill in the gaps between having invertebrates available. And I think that Richmond Mill, which is where Bob grew 3-pound bluegill, is a great example of that. I really don't think that those 3-pound bluegill that were grown at Richmond Mill were because of pellets.
No.
The pellets filled in the little gaps where maybe the invertebrates were waning a little bit. But in the end, it was about great water quality. It was about having big macroinvertebrates, big, 10 millimeter to 30 millimeter invertebrates available all the time. And really, we try really hard to make pellets mimic natural feed, but it's really nice to have good natural feed all the time.
Yes, and Richmond Mill did that. I see Greg Grimes checking in there. Stephen Mondrush, talk about pond depth. Leo's got another question. Lisa Kearns Marks is asking a question or checking in. Oh, your doorbell's ringing.
Yep, my dad will get that. It's probably my cousin Craig. My dad needs to tell my cousin Craig to be quiet.
Yeah, they're over there watching the baseball game.
Because he'll talk a lot during the game, and it'll interfere with the shot.
Yeah, it's 1-1. Vanderbilt, Michigan, 1-1.
If we're live, is that?
Yeah, it always does that. I don't know why.
All right.
Dallas Winkleman, Bruce Campbell, no, Bruce Condello.
What?
All right, let's go here.
What?
We got some more questions here. Let's see here. Dick Tabbert says his bluegill are never big enough. Well, I don't think any of our bluegills are ever big enough. And you know what? I want to circle back on Richmond Mill in a minute. Steven says, can you guys talk about how pond depth has an impact on bluegill size? Yeah, we can talk about that.
Can I talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead. Hit
Pond depth. The more that you can get sunlight penetration to the bottom of your pond, you're increasing the volume of water that's available for fish growth.
Littoral zone. Remember
Littoral
that.
zone.
Look that up.
Okay, so anything that's below the level that light ever reaches becomes what we call anoxic.
Yep.
So if you don't get light, you don't get the type of chemical processes that will allow for oxygen production and then consequently the invertebrate production. So if you're looking at really having a good quality pond and then great fish growth that goes along with it, you want your sunlight penetration to be as deep as you can get it over time. Now, a lot of ponds will have like these algae blooms, and like currently right now the quarry is having a bloom of planktonic algae.
We don't like that.
No, it's not great. So it's like keeping the sunlight penetration from 6 feet up to like, now it's only like 3.5 or 4 feet. But over time, you want to have the best water quality possible so that you're getting sunlight penetration to the bottom of the pond, which keeps oxygen available at the bottom of the pond at the substrate, which helps you produce the big invertebrates. The big invertebrates then fuel the food chain.
That's right.
It's a protein thing. You get this good, high quality protein with lots of micronutrients available because you're growing bugs. You're growing little.
That's it. And you know what? And kind of Leo's going to show his genius on us and call us out here. He says,
Leo!
With excessive relative weights from artificial feeds, what is the absorbable calcium content to supplement to reinforce the skeletal structure based on your experience?
Leo, you went way over my head there. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, no, he really didn't. So he just.
Okay, Bob.
Yeah.
I'll let you field Leo's question.
All right, here's the deal. That's why water quality is so important. So let's circle back on water quality for a minute. If your water quality has at least 40 parts per million alkalinity, which is measured in calcium carbonate, if the pH is somewhere between 6 and 8, even a little bit less than 6 is okay as long as the alkalinity is up there some. There's enough calcium derived from the water that they don't have to depend on the feed to get it. But how much do they need? I don't know. I'm going to guess maybe somewhere under 20 parts per million in the water to derive enough from the natural food chain to build a skeleton. So here's the take-home point from that little line I just threw at you. As long as you've got some alkalinity, some meaning 40 parts per million or higher, and your pH is somewhere between 6 and 8, as steady as your water quality is, that's going to have an impact on the stress-free days that your bluegills have, or that all your fish have, to be able to grow. So it circles back to the first thing Bruce said in this broadcast, is you really want good, healthy water. If you've got good, healthy water, good oxygen levels, you got pH that's above 5.5, but not much higher than 8.5, and you've got a good food source, you're going to have good quality fish. Now what the feed does, the feed takes the fish to the next level. Because there's such a competition going on among all these different fish that supplemental feeding, Hank, if Hank wants to get in here, he just needs to step in and step
Hank's
up.
a jerk sometimes.
No, he's not. He's a nice guy. We like him.
He's a nice guy, but he keeps interrupting.
Oh, he's your favorite guy, dude. Come on. Let's see.
Hank. I love Hank. If Hank would join in right now, that would be the best thing ever.
Yep, I wish
Hank,
he would.
I'm calling you out, buddy. Hank, do you hear me? Hank Parker.
Nick Allen says, Pond Boss, I hear you're coming to my family farm, Morgantown, Indiana, to inspect our lake. Am I? I'd love to. When am I coming? Tell me.
Nick Allen, this is the man.
I would be there.
Not me.
Hey,
him.
If Bruce tells you I'm coming, I'm coming. Frank James says, if the shallow, less than 4 feet deep parts of the ponds are covered with dense weeds, how does this affect bluegill spawning? Is it overall a detriment due to decreased spawning or a benefit due to increased survival of young of the year fish?
The bluegill will overcome that rooted vegetation no matter what.
Yes.
If you have a good density of adult male bluegill that are what we call parental males, they will find a way around the vegetation issues. They will fan their nest to a point where they will beat the vegetation up.
Yep.
You may, if you want to fish them, which by the way you should do cautiously, but if you want to fish for male bluegills and you have this rooted vegetation all the way around your body of water, what you'd want to do is look for slightly cloudy areas, because their tail fanning in those areas will give them up. You'll see a little bit of just turbidity in the water. It's okay. Don't overfish them. Don't keep them for sure, because you want to continue to release any male bluegill that you catch. These parental males are key to growing big bluegill.
Okay, explain that even more. Why do you want to keep these male bluegills that are pretty good size on the beds? What's the point?
Every body of water has a certain X amount of spawning substrate. So if you were to allow the parental male bluegill to stay on their beds, they will occupy all of the available quality spawning ground, which means that the upcoming class of male bluegill will now have no spawning beds to work with, and they're going to stay on the feed bag. They're going to stay on the feed bag. They're going to eat, and they're going to eat, and they're going to eat, because in their minds, in their little tiny walnut-sized brains.
That's a full-grown one, though.
Yeah, right, a full-grown one.
Yep.
They're going to realize that they can't get to the best spawning ground, so it's time to eat. So they're going to eat and eat and eat and eat. So what's going to happen is that second tier of bluegill is going to stay on the feed bag, continue to eat, and they're going to grow rapidly, because their goal is to come in and subvert those male bluegill that are already on the beds from last year. And so you get this, like, the 8-inch and 9-inch bluegill sometimes, if the 10-inchers are still guarding the nest, will grow like crazy. And all of a sudden you can end up with a bunch of 10-inch bluegill. But in order to do that, you have to show some restraint. If you catch a 10-inch bluegill, throw him back. And if you catch 10 of them in a spot, just ease up, move on to the next spot.
Leave them alone.
Maybe if you catch 5 of them, just quit at that point, because that's going to allow the ones that are still guarding the nest to stay on the nest, keep doing what they're doing, but most importantly, keep the 8-inchers off the nest, which means they're going to keep eating and keep growing.
So if you want to eat a few fish, eat the next size smaller than your
Right.
biggest fish.
Yeah.
And it's okay to do that. There's Jose Latore checking in from Florida.
Jose,
Mike Rosa.
Mike,
Let's see. Keith Mouty says, I have a small pond, 8 acres.
that's
not
not
a small
small.
pond.
That's not small.
That's a lake.
Small is a 1/4 acre.
Says he's got bluegill, red ears. He's got catfish and grass-eating carp. What can you do for bigger bass? Looky, Dusty Allen's checking in. Corey Schropfer's checking in too.
Dusty Allen.
So what can Keith do for bigger bass?
Bigger bass?
How do you grow bigger bass
Bigger bass
in an
would
8-acre
be,
lake?
Absolutely. Depending on state regulations, pound those 10 to 14 inches.
Well, and it depends on the state that you're in.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of states like Texas, where I live, you don't have to abide by state regulations. Oklahoma, if the state stocks your lake, you're abiding by their regulations. If you buy fish from a fish hatchery, you can make your own rules. But here's what Bruce is saying. If you want to grow big bass, you've got to selectively harvest the excess bass. So in other words, half the bass you've got are boys. They're not going to get any bigger than about 2 pounds, cull males. Now, it's easy for me to sit here and say that, you know, because it's like my good friend says, sounds easy, does hard. You got to spread their little fins and look sometimes. You know, but if you weigh and measure some fish, go by their relative weight chart, which I can get you one of those. If you'll just email me, I'll send you a little spreadsheet where you can plug your fish in. You want to be culling bass after the 3rd year. Don't do it on a newly stocked lake. Don't do it until after the 3rd year. Then you're taking out young of the year fish that are underperforming and underweight, which is typically young of the year fish.
Exactly.
So that's what you want to do.
But if you're unsure, I would say WWHPD. Just remember that. You know what that means?
No.
What would Hank Parker do?
What would Hank? Okay. All right. So Keith says you took out 300 bass last year. Keith, you need to be weighing and measuring those bass, at least half of them. And you can judge by the lengths and the weights of those bass that you've taken out. Let's see, 8 acres, 300 bass. That's how many bass? That's 40. That's 35 bass per acre. That's a lot of bass to harvest. And also, when you're harvesting by angling, it's even more important, like what Greg Grimes is saying, you got to be selective. All right, so in other words, when you catch those 300 bass, when you're catching those and you're looking at them, if some of them are really thick, you know, and they look like a sumo wrestler, or like Ray Scott says, an Alabama deputy sheriff, you're throwing those back. If they look like a long distance runner from somewhere deep in somewhere else in a 3rd world country, and they're thin, you're taking those out.
Careful, Bob.
I did. I thought through it a little bit.
Careful.
Look at there. There's Zach Russell checking in. He's over there in
Zach.
He's you know what? And that's Zach. Zach's got it. Keith, Lake's 18 years old. That's good. Zach's talking about the Smartfish app. You guys look that up. Wade Bales with Quality Lakes has created an app where you can plug your fish in, length and weight, and it's going to tell you what the relative weight is. If your relative weight is under 90, cull it.
Yeah.
Cull
Right.
it.
Absolutely.
You got to make that fish be chunky. Now, another thing to remember when you're culling bass is that you are likely culling the most aggressive fish in the lake. So when you're taking out 300 bass, I hope you threw back 150 that are bigger, chunkier fish. So you're preserving that aggressive gene. That's a big deal, guys.
So some people say that Ray Scott is the godfather of catch and release, right?
Well, he is for largemouth bass, but he learned it from brook trout anglers up in Colorado.
But you know what Ray Scott is really the godfather of?
Tell me.
Big bluegill.
You know what? He grew some big bluegill over there.
And the reason is that when it finally became en vogue to release your largemouth bass, what happens is you get a lot of ponds, a lot of bodies of water that would get a glut of 10 to 15 inch largemouth bass. And what they do is put pressure on the young of your bluegill. You get fewer survivors every year of each bluegill class, and they would grow a lot faster because you'd had, maybe a 1 acre pond would have 500 bluegill instead of 5,000 bluegill competing for the same resource. And so Ray Scott, as much as we love him, our good friend, who is one of the geniuses, one of the all-time icons of bass management, has really been the best thing ever for big bluegill.
True story. Of course, everything we're saying is true. Unless it's an opinion, then it's pretty true anyway. When I first met Ray, I'd listened to him. I knew he was the father of catch and release. This was probably 1995, 96. He was at an outdoor show in Mesquite, Texas, in Dallas. And I had a booth, a Pond Boss booth, trying to hawk a few subscriptions there. By the way, $35 a year, folks. $35 a year. Go to pondboss.com or call the office. You can buy this
I believe in this.
It's a great magazine, don't you think?
It's the best magazine.
There's always some nuggets in there every time.
There's never been anything like it.
So, you guys, this is a cool story. I'm going to take a few minutes and tell it. Ray was at this outdoor show, and I had a booth for Pond Boss, and I didn't pay for the booth. The guy that had the trailer where you put live bass in it, he needed live bass, so I rented. I bought a bunch of bass, feed train bass from the Inslee Fish Farm, put them in the tank so the anglers would have some fish to catch in the display tank, and in exchange for a booth. And then I manned the booth for 5 days. Well, I saw where Ray was going to put in a personal appearance. Well, I'd been wanting to meet him, and I'd never met him. And I just finished writing a book, Raising Trophy Bass. And Ray had a book out called Bass Boss. Well, he was there hawking his book, $20. So I go up to his table, and I'm standing in line with everybody else. And it's my turn to buy a book. He says, "You want my book?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He says, "You want me to sign it for you?" I said, "Absolutely." And I gave him $20 bill. And he says, "What's your name?" I said, "I'm Bob Lusk." And he said, "The Pond Boss?" And I thought, oh my gosh, he knows who I am. I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Well, by gosh, I'm Ray Scott. I'm so pleased to meet you. I've been reading your magazine for years. I love what you're doing." And I said, "Well, man, I'm flattered that you even know who I am." And he says, "Don't you have a book out?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "How much is it?" I said, $20. So I got my $20 bill back. He said, "Go get me one of your books. You sign yours. I'll sign mine, and let's talk." So I went and got a book, and I brought it back, and he autographed his, autographed mine. I said, I got to ask you a question. Do you really, really, really believe in catch and release? He says, "Oh, yeah, by golly, I do." He says, in public lakes, he said, that's a big deal. He said, public lakes are under so much pressure, catch and release is a big, big deal. He says, but in my lake, we're going to take out every bass 15 inches and under, and when I think we've taken enough, we're going to double it and take that many more. So at that moment, I knew I was going to enjoy hanging around with Ray. And part of what he's done is his lake over there south of Montgomery, Alabama, is so fertile and so productive, it generates literally thousands of young bass, which help eat lots and lots of baby bluegill, and consequently, he's got what? Big bluegills.
Big bluegill.
Bruce is over here sharing this video to his.
I'm sure everybody. So, question, Bob, how much is a 1 year subscription to Pond Boss magazine?
$35 a year, folks. $35 a year.
I would say that if you own a pond, or if you help manage a pond, that The average mistake costs you $3,500.
Oh, you know what? That is so right. I can't tell you how many times somebody will call me and they've gone over budget, or they went over budget to build the lake, and they want to cut the budget for stocking fish. And 4 years down the road, they have a pickle. You can't unpickle that pickle.
Yeah.
And the more you can learn, the smarter you can be.
That's the first time that's ever been said.
Yes, at your table anyway.
Yeah, at my table. You can't unpickle that pickle.
Dick Tabbert says, all my bass are chunky, but they're under 12 inches. I put them in the neighbor's pond, about 25 a year. Well, I don't know if the neighbor should thank you or hit you in the mouth. So you're taking, and of course, Dick, you're a fan, you're a good friend, and I'm kind of teasing on that, but I'm kind of not. Eat them. Don't take those bass and put them in the neighbor's pond, because you're not necessarily doing that neighbor a service. Let me explain this here. I'm a fisheries biologist. I do make a living when I sell some fish. I do make a profit. I make money consulting. That's the way I get paid. But I'm going to tell you, I also speak the truth about this kind of stuff. If you're taking fish that have been thriving in your pond and put them in somebody else's pond, there's no guarantee that they're going to thrive in that pond. It's smarter to take those fish and eat them than it is just to say, I'm going to do my neighbor a favor and go put him in his pond. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that 100%. And so does Hank.
Hank's been around a long time. He's even in black and white.
He agrees with everything we say.
Let me see what else, see if I've missed anything here.
You know who else agrees with that? Robert Downey Jr.
That's good stuff, man. All right, so Chuck Brinkman, he's over here near St. Louis. He says, I have been feeding Aquamax 400 grower near the cattails when I feed the MVP and sport fish largemouth to the other fish. So basically, Chuck's got a feeding program. He's feeding his big fish, big feeds. He's feeding his medium-sized fish, medium-sized feed. And where he's got some cattails in his small pond in Missouri, he knows he's got baby bluegill in those cattails. So he's feeding it's almost a consistency of cornmeal, which is a grower starter feed that fish hatcheries use all the time. And he's feeding his small bluegill. He says, I've noticed the bass growing a little faster. I figured that I didn't get this size eating small portions, neither would my fish. That's right. Now, you know what? I want to go back to a point that Bruce made. So yes, the nugget size, the kibble size, they say in the feed business, makes a difference on conversion rates. So in other words, if a fish can eat 6 pellets instead of 600 pellets, its conversion rates are going to be better because it expends a whole lot less energy.
Right.
Looks like Vanderbilt just hit a home run.
Vanderbilt's up 4-1.
Oh, yep, something just happened.
And
what happened over there,
And
guys?
as my cousin Craig said, Michigan is figuring out that they're Michigan right now.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
He's chuckling.
The problem with this video, Bob, is I've noticed if I lean back a little bit,
Yeah.
I look like I'm sort of uninvolved and I'm
Or
like
smaller.
a little head. But if I lean forward,
You're like in the game.
I have a giant face.
You're in the game.
Okay, I'm in the game. I'm
All
going to
right,
try to
so
just
now-
lean back just to where we have the same size head.
So now we're going to circle back to Richmond Mill Lake and the 3-pound, 4-ounce bluegill. There's been 4 of them caught that I know of that have actually been weighed, and he caught one of them, or 2 of them. How many did you catch?
2.
So he's caught 2 of those 3¼ pound bluegill. Here's the difference in that lake. Yes, it produces lots of invertebrates. I do think it's due in large part to the feeding program, because here's the thing. That lake flows 7,000 to 10,000 gallons a minute of 5.3 pH water. We're going to have to mix up another one of those in a
This has
minute.
been empty for like half an hour.
Yeah, you need to eat the cherry like I did a while ago.
Right.
And
Eat the cherry?
yeah. What's that line in The Office? Never mind.
We don't want
But one thing we did with Richmond Mill Lake is we fed the fish year round. We fed them through the winter. Bruce is going to pour a little bit more of that Buffalo Trace. So we fed those fish year round.
just a little.
Yeah,
Just a touch.
Just to make sure that if those fish wanted to eat through the course of the winter. Now this is near Laurinburg, North Carolina,
Yes.
Laurel Hill, North Carolina. So take the climate into effect. It's affected by the Atlantic seaboard through there. Those fish had the fish they wanted. I had the fish food they wanted all year long. And I firmly believe that makes a big difference on growing some really, really huge bluegill. So if you want to grow some huge bluegill, you need several things. You need lots of invertebrates. You need a good, healthy fish food. You need to minimize reproduction by having predator fish that can keep the bluegill numbers thinned down. Here we go. He's gonna put some ice in that. Good stuff. And you need to be selective about what you harvest. So pay attention to those. Okay. Keith Mowdy says, a guy told me a catfish will eat its weight every something, and that I should call all the big ones out. Catfish, what is that? Is that a salmon? You've been to the seafood market again, haven't you? So, I have a new dog. I have a new puppy. Her name is Girlfriend.
Her name is Girlfriend?
Yeah, she's a sweetheart. You kind of reminded me because she kisses me just like that fish just did. So, on culling catfish. Okay, so here's Keith's question. He says a guy told me a catfish will eat its weight every month. I guess it. Okay, here's the thing: a catfish, given the opportunity, and you know what? This holds true for most fish. They will eat, if they can, 3% of their body weight every day. Now, the size of the mouth often dictates how much they'll eat. You know, a 4-pound bass can eat 1.25 pound bass. Well, that's a little bit more than 3% of its body weight, but on average, fish that are fed will eat 3% of their body weight every day. So, now, with a catfish, depending on the kind of food you're feeding, dry weight fish food, it'll convert it about 2 to 1 or 1.5 to 1. On the really high protein quality fish food, you can figure a conversion rate of 1.2 to 1.3. So 1.2 to 1.3 pounds of food yields a pound of growth. Now, when fish are feeding on other fish, it's 10 to 1. So 10 pounds of bluegill will grow 1 pound of bass. The difference is those 10 pounds of bluegill, about 8 pounds of that's water. So there's nothing nutritious about that, but that's what they're made of. Joe Sitta, do you know Joe?
No, I've never met Joe, but Joe, peace.
He says, I have a friend who has a pond full of stunted bass. If I take some of them out of there and put them in my pond, will they always stay stunted or can they grow larger? Here's the thing about that. My little dissertation a while ago is don't do it. Now, here's what's going on. When bass are stunted, let me explain it this way. Fish have the genetic potential and the propensity to grow to a certain size given the opportunity.
And their sex.
And whether it's a boy or a girl. When a fish misses a meal over a long period of time, misses a meal for a month, they can't make that up.
No, they can't.
If they don't eat for 3 or 4 days, they can make that up. Like compensatory growth is fine. That's a little fisheries term where if a fish doesn't eat for 3 days and it gorges itself, it will regain and grow even better. But if a fish is truly stunted, you're going to see its growth on the tail end of its life. It will only get so big. So I don't ever recommend moving fish from one pond to another unless I know the age and I know that it's helping both ponds. If it's not helping both ponds, I won't recommend it. So I'm going to tell you no. Now, Greg's chiming in. He says, yes, stunted bass will grow, but they've lost years of growth. That's true. But something else that needs to be said is when that fish grew up and got stunted in that pond and then moves to yours, there's no guarantee that it's going to make the conversion and recondition to a new environment. Because bass and all fish really grow based on their genetic potential, whether it's a male or a female, the amount of food it's got and how much it's conditioned to that body of water. That's called plasticity. That's a little fisheries term. You got 2 fisheries terms. It'll be a test tomorrow. So those fish, you know, if they grew up in Bruce's Lake, right here, the quarry that is behind us that you can't see, and then he moves them to a 4-acre lake down the road, there's no assurance that those fish are going to make that transition and thrive. Matter of fact, only maybe 30 out of 100 will do that. If you do it. So I'd say don't do it. Okay, here comes Leo again. As you indicated that the fish is required to eat year-round for optimal growth, is there a secret to stimulate their appetites, especially during winter? Yeah, consistency. If they know they're going to have a consistent source of food that's a good, healthy food, they're going to be there when they want to. What dictates that is the temperature and the metabolism rate. So if their metabolism rate slows down in colder water, they're not going to be as likely to come to that feed. But I know this, when we present it in Richmond Mill Lake that flows 7,000 to 10,000 gallons a minute of 5.3 pH water with zero alkalinity, zero minerals, the water looks like iced tea, or actually it looks like that Buffalo Trace whiskey. Let's see that. It's about the same color as this whiskey flowing through that lake over there. The water chemistry is consistent.
And Leo, one thing to keep in mind is being from California, the difference between California and Nebraska is that oftentimes in Nebraska you get an ice cover followed by snow cover. And what happens with the snow cover is what we were talking about earlier, where you get decreased light penetration and you get the bottom of the pond or lake that you're talking about. From the bottom up, you start to lose oxygen. And so if you have oxygen depletion at the bottom of a pond or lake, there's no feeding going on.
That's right.
So you start to force the fish.
Because they're stressed out.
Right.
I mean, they're more worried about not dying than growing and thriving.
So they'll move up closer and closer to the ice and they become less and less concerned about eating and growing than they do about just living.
Yeah, they don't want to die.
So Leo, in California, without ice, I would think just decent water quality, even with the cooler water, you're still going to have continued growth. But if you get in Nebraska or South Dakota or Minnesota where you have ice cover, you really should try to be thinking about what kind of water clarity do I have? Does the sunlight reach the bottom of the water column?
Yes.
And if so, if it does, that's why you get a lot of really good growth in ponds or lakes that have good clarity, because throughout the entire winter, you have sunlight reaching the bottom, you get a little bit of plant growth there, that little bit of rooted vegetation on the bottom is producing some oxygen. And that oxygen means fish can use the whole water column.
Yes, and they will.
That's right. They will, and they'll eat. And those invertebrates will not die on the bottom of the pond.
No, they just hang out.
Because they have oxygen. And they'll even continue some of their life processes. They'll work around, they'll wiggle around on the bottom, and those bluegill come down and pound on them over and over again. So you might have a bluegill, the difference of good water quality, bluegill might add 1% or 2% body weight during the winter, but in poor water quality, it might lose 5% or 10% or even 15%. And then over time, if you look at a 5-year period, if a bluegill is losing 10% of body weight every single winter, that's hard to make up during the summer.
Yeah.
In the end, a 6-year-old bluegill is going to weigh half of what one will that had good water quality during the winter.
Yes, inadequate food.
Do you buy that?
I'm totally in, man.
I just made that up.
No, you didn't. You've lived it. All right, let's see here. I saw something. Dale Jessup says, what kind of fish do you suggest for a classroom aquaponics project?
Good question, Dale. Dale Jessup, good question. You want fish that won't die.
You know what? Channel cat are a good call. Tilapia are good.
Yes.
And bluegill can be good.
Because usually these classroom projects are going to be indoors. And so you're not going to have water temperatures say going to drop below 55 or 60. So channel cat, tilapia.
Yep. Bluegill can be good as long as
look at
not
hybrid
many.
bluegill. How about hybrid bluegill?
Hybrid bluegill, they're outstanding because they'll feed readily, which you want, because you want to be feeding the fish so the fish can grow and put off a little bit of waste to fuel the nutrition of your aquaponics garden. So let's see here. Look at that. There's your mom checking in. Nadine Condello.
That's my mom.
She's calling out Ed Bantam.
By the way, Vanderbilt's up 4-1 right now.
Yep, there was
Michigan
a pickoff at first.
Still realizing they're Michigan.
Okay, let's see what else we got here.
What are we, Craig? 4th inning?
Top of 4.
Top of the fourth.
Right. Still 4-1. Still anybody's game. Michigan struggling a little bit. Michigan playing with a bunch of 18-year-olds and Vanderbilt with a bunch of 26-year-olds. I don't know how that's fair. But
David Schneiderman, my small quarter-acre pond is full of small bluegills. We've caught a couple of really healthy bass from this pond. Do we leave these bass in the pond to feast on the bluegill buffet or move them to the big pond? That totally depends on your goals, David. If you want to use because I know you've got a bigger pond. So if you want to use that small pond to help fuel the economy of the bigger lake, put the bass in the bigger lake. Because what'll happen there is you're going to get that many more baby bluegills that you can trap out and move over and enhance the food chain and increase your odds of growing big bluegill. So knowing your situation, because I've seen your ponds, I would cull the bass, move them to your big lake, let the small quarter-acre pond become a hatchery pond, and trap some bluegill out and move them out every time you go up there over a weekend, set a trap, whatever you catch, move them to the big lake. Because what that'll do is that'll cause the remaining bluegill to either get bigger or have more babies. Both of those things are good for what you're wanting to do. Here's Roxy Blasdell. You got something else?
Quick point for everybody.
Yeah, we got to roll. We got 5 minutes left.
In 5 minutes and 1 second, your opportunity to make an endowment to the Palm Bass Foundation will end. So if you have a large sum of money, especially 7 figures, make it hashtag Bob Lusk, hashtag drive-by, hashtag Deadpool. But
Go
you want
fund me,
to, if you want to, especially anybody who has $1 million or more dollars, Palm Bass Foundation will take check, money order.
Hey, but you know what? Along those same lines, we are going to have the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology coming up.
You need to go.
In
You
October,
need to go to this.
And one in April.
Don't miss it.
So it's going to be advertised in the upcoming issue of Pond Boss Magazine. It's not cheap, but it's worth it. So if you are real serious about becoming a better pond meister, if you want to start your own pond management business, if you're a biologist and want to learn more,
Or if you like infused bourbon.
you're coming, aren't you? We're going to work this out. We're going to
Depends
negotiate.
If Leo's there, I'm there.
Oh, Leo. Holy cow. Well, look for details in the next Pond Boss Magazine.
Leo,
Listen.
I'm offering you half price on Pondology.
Thanks.
$1,400. Leo for $700. But as long
No,
as
it's
you cover-
$1,500 for the big deal.
$750 for you, Leo. If you come in, I'll cover the other $750. If Bob won't take it, I'm covering the other $750.
Oh my gosh.
That's for you, Leo.
Dude.
That's you.
And you can learn and teach.
Yes, learn. And
All right,
teach.
we got 4 minutes, so let's do this. Roxy Blasdell, I find that a lot of what you pond meisters are saying. Did she say you pond meisters or he?
That must mean
Us. Okay, very similar to what deer experts tell you. It's parallel. It really is. It's all about habitat, food chain, genetics, and harvest.
Yes.
That's what it's about.
Right.
If you want to drill down to the basics, that's it right there. Much of what it takes to grow big bluegill is generally the same as what it takes to grow and hold a big buck. That's true. The only difference is a doe may have twins or triplets, and a doe bluegill might have 10,000 of them. We got to cull through, sift through fish that are eating each other,
right,
where the deer aren't. So that's a big difference. Although it's parallel. You're exactly right. Leo says their experimentation on using predation species to maximize feeding potential for excessive growth. Haven't discovered much analytical results for a convincing approach. Any insight? I'm looking at compensatory growth. I think that's a pretty good way to look at some things, especially, okay, you're doing it in your own aquarium. See, I love aquaria, but I like ponds better. Shannon Kane's checking in from Sherman, Texas. Keith says, I've been putting concrete blocks with PVC pipe like little trees as structure. What's the perfect depth and location? The perfect depth and location for that stuff is above your thermocline. In most ponds, thermocline's at 7 feet, so I'm going to say 6 feet deep.
Yeah.
Is that what you say?
Yeah, I was going to say 6.
Hey, we're on the same wavelength.
Right.
All right, Nathan Martin. Simple formula for big fish, regardless of species. Thin the herd, increase food availability and consumption, regulate angling pressure. Bam! That's it, man.
Bam.
That sums it up.
Regulate angling pressure.
That's it. That sums it up. Where'd Hank go? Is he still around? All right, guys. Hey, thanks for joining us tonight. What a fast-paced hour this has been. Now we're going to watch baseball and drink a little bit more Buffalo Trace and eat some food. Hank, we love Hank Parker.
Parker, you really didn't have anything good to add, but you know what? You're a special person.
And he's fished. He's fished Richmond Mill Lake. And actually, you know what? I gave him a copy of the magazine. Bruce is maybe Hank Parker's biggest fan, if you can't tell.
I love Hank Parker.
But
you are the man. We have a man crush. I have a man crush on Hank Parker.
Put it down.
No,
put it down.
Okay, all right.
So, $35 a year, Pond Boss Magazine. We also have a resource guide, free. Email us at info@pondboss.com. We'll get that for you. Don't forget, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like. Share this to your timeline. Share the video. Tell people about us. You'll be eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat.
Michigan bases loaded, right, Craig?
And a Pond Boss mug. So we're going to go watch a little baseball.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Keith is going to subscribe. We're going to hold you to it, Keith.
If you don't subscribe, we're coming after you.
Now, hey, there's Anthony Rodriguez. Good to see you, Anthony. So, hey, folks, thanks for joining us. Come again every Wednesday night from somewhere, unless I can't. Then we're going to be doing this thing live, and send me an email. I'll be happy to help you in any way we can.
The man.
We've got an outstanding resource guide. We've got a lot of vendors out there, got a lot of great friends that can help you with anything to do with pond boss. Greg Grimes, you know, he's been a fisheries biologist. He learned about pond boss when he was in college, and now he does it for a living. He's one of the best in the nation.
Greatest pond boss expert ever. Greatest pond management expert ever. Talk to Bob Lusk. Ignore me. Ignore.
No, don't ignore Bruce.
Greg is good.
Oh gosh, we're going to have a mutual fan club.
All right.
Hey, thanks for checking in.
Everybody
We will
good.
see you next
All right,
time.
take care.
Adios.
We're out.
Here we go.
Okay.
High five.
All right.
Bye, y'all.